Introduce, my name is Maria Caley. I am a lecturer at the University of Namibia. I am also a fashion designer and textile designer. So after graduating, I was educated in the university where I teach in Namibia. After I graduated, I became a fashion designer and I've participated in enormous platforms all over Africa. And then a couple of years ago, I realized it's very hard to carry on this fashion business because I used to operate alone. The work that I'm going to share with you today is also how I still kind of create fashion, but more of meaningful creations that kind of give me some motive to continue creating fashion, but also at the same time engaging social political issues around my town or my country. From wearing leather and then transition into wearing trade cloth. And with this, the adoption of trade cloth in Namibia, it kind of also gained new meaning, and a lot of fashion and textiles that you see today is connotation of certain politics and social status. So I'll be able to show you a little bit of that today. So for location, Namibia is just on top of South Africa and it's a desert country. So when you look at Namibia, it's actually the map in green, and it's mainly desert. And on the other side is the sea. Because Namibia is mainly desert, we are not fortunate enough to grow and keep animals that can give us good fibers to create our own textiles. And because of that, most of Namibians, they used to wear leather. Namibia and South Africa share a lot of history, political history. For those who know, one probably old, they know that Namibia used to be actually a province of South Africa. So we're called Southern Africa, Southwest Africa province of South Africa. So we gained independence in 1990, but even though we are an independent country, we still haven't cut our umbilical cord from South Africa. So our economies are very interlinked, and also a lot of influence that came with apartheid, colonial influence, and so on are still traces of Namibia. That shows you different ethnic groups from Namibia. They were participating in a cultural stage, traditional performance. These state-sponsored cultural festivals are very, very influential when it comes to maintaining and creating identities among Namibian people. Our independent country ran on the motto of "We must be united." But even though we are united, we're actually different. So a lot of Namibian ethnic groups, they actually use a lot of leather for clothing. So if you can look at the image, you'll see that there's different ethnic groups from our Wambo people, and then you see some San communities, which South African people refer to as the Khoisan. So we've also got quite a huge, not huge, but different groups of the San community. So we've got the Kwe and the Kun, and they are also kind of one of the most marginalized group in Namibia. So you'll find them mostly in the central region, but also in the northern parts of Namibia. Then we also have the Tswanas, which South Africa and Botswana also have. Also very, very small population. And then we've got Kavangos, which is my ethnic group where I come from. And then if you look at the image, they're all wearing leather, but you can see how they actually manipulated the leather and how they adorn themselves is very different in particular to the group. Okay, so when we look at traditional clothing, it actually is embedded with a lot of meaning. And when we look at a particular group, even though they wear probably the same leather from the same animal, depending on how they adorn it and how they use it for it gets a different meaning. So leather, skins, and furs were basically the material that was used for covering and protecting the body. Also both physical and spiritual, because it's known that certain skins, they possess certain powers from whatever animal it came from. So when you look at the skins, it's not just a physical covering, but it's also the physical covering and the spiritual covering and as a protection. So they also carry certain status symbol. For instance, for most of our royals, they would wear the cheetah skin, and nobody in that class was allowed to wear any other cheetah. And if you were found to be wearing cheetah, you basically are committing a crime, and you would be dealt with. So certain skins also symbolize or carried a certain status. And then there were different cultural values of each skin that actually was used for clothing or protection. So I'll draw from my indigenous language, Rwandale. So I put these two sayings or idioms from my language. So one of them is ogo kwamvika mohunyu zazimbo. So when you translate the idiom basically means that one was carried in the baby carrier made from a sorry, I can't see a hyena. So the baby carrier that is made from a hyena was considered very rare and very lucky, because for hunters, most of the skins that they would get was from the common animals that were roaming around. So the daggers were very common, but for you to get a hyena and get the skin and make a baby carrier out of it, you must be very, very lucky. So people were carried in such kits were considered to be extremely lucky, and all will be well in your life, hopefully. So then the other one that I also like was Ogomgadi Kwarimanga Janeko, meaning that woman has tied her back apron with kind of a certain flair. But what it also indicates is that woman is very strong-willed, and that woman basically can be somebody so powerful and can do a lot of things by themselves. And it's also probably an ideology around feminism. So when you look at cultural values, although we kind of think that cultures change and they were also very much frowned upon and probably not considered something worthy, they also had certain ideologies like feminism. I would say that was probably one of the earliest feminist kind of ideologies among the traditional communities. As a fashion designer and textile designer, we often have to look back in the archives, because we find our inspiration from where we come from, and most of the Namibian people have changed so much. So when you look at the Namibian groups, although during the state sponsored festivals, you can see them wearing an imitation of the traditional clothing, but it's not quite the same because it has changed so much and a lot of it have actually disappeared. So as a fashion and textile designer and lecturer, we often go to the archives to find information and visuals and inspiration. So these images you see is Herero women, how they used to wear before they actually changed to what they wear now. So currently, when you look at Herero women, they dress in a very iconic dress that's very Victorian style with horns type of headdress. But this is what they used to wear then. So it was all leather. The headdress was called a kori, also made from leather. And then the whole front and back apron also from leather, and they had these clothes that they also cover their body. And then they all were adorned and had some metal details to kind of keep it weighted and close to the body. And when you look at the ankles, I don't know if you can see clearly on those images, the ankles were also adorned heavily with metal and beadwork that was made from metal. So as a woman, a Herero woman, you could not walk any faster. So because of all how heavy your garment was, and somehow it was kind of became kind of the flair that is expected of Herero women. So you must walk with such a majestic and very very demure, if I have to call it. So you can't swiftly hurrying about doing your work. You are expected to walk very slow, and if you have to carry out any work, you do it very slowly at your pace. So next image. Another image that was very fascinating was in the archive of Ethnographic Museum from Berlin. This I stumbled upon when we were working on the restitution project with the missionary, with the Berlin Museum. And these clothes and blankets were handmade. And it was in the 1800s. And they were made from patched leather. And the other one on the right hand side is made from fox fur and stitched together. And they are quite wide, almost 1.5 meter and 2 meters wide, and all made by hand. But this was also a very interesting discovery for me because for the longest time we were taught that the Nama people of Namibia, they did their patchwork because they came across lost nappies of cults, and they started making these Tamara patchwork dresses. But this for me, it changed the whole story. So basically, the Nama people already knew how to make patchwork from leather by hand. So when they were introduced with trade cloth, it's just a matter of transitioning and using a different material. So when we look at traditional clothing in Namibia, there were different agents of change that actually influenced people to change how they dress. So the first early agents of change were traders and explorers. So when they traveled through Namibia, they brought a lot of European clothing, European goods, and they exchanged with kettles and so on. And by the time the missionaries came and settled in Namibia, most of the Namibian groups were already used to some European goods. So they just had to kind of continue and look for what was the most liked material and so on. So there was often also a friction between traders and missionaries because they were kind of fighting for influence over the people. So when the first trade clothes were traded through Namibia, they were actually worn in a traditional style. So they weren't cut up into dresses. They were just used as they were draped around the body like they used to drape their skins. And then obviously we got some colonial influence that came with the Germans and then later with missionaries as well. And through that, as they were introducing the Namibian people to work came before missionaries because they were building a lot of infrastructure, railway, and so on. So through that, they wanted Namibian people to work and help them create all the infrastructures. And through that, because they have to work as farm workers, railway, in the mines, and so on, they were instructed to change how they dress. So a lot of women would be told to cut off their hair. A lot of women were told to throw away their skins and wear European dresses. And this also happened with the men. They had to shave their head and they had to wear European clothing. And it was quite a traumatic thing that happened within the society because traditional clothing was so particular and women and men looked differently. So, with European clothing that insisted that they had to shave off their traditional dress, women were not very pleased that they have to start looking like men. There's actually certain sayings that say, now we had to look like men who are cows without any horns, so a hornless cow, in other words. So there's a lot of narratives in the indigenous language when you try to investigate how people felt about the whole transition. It was quite traumatic and very humiliating. So this is just to show you an image of what type of trade cloth was actually introduced to the Namibian people. It was a cheese cloth, very cheap and flimsy. Obviously, the color is not quite the aesthetics that Namibian are used to. So because the quality and the color wasn't what the people liked, they actually use traditional ointment called rukura. Rukura is made from wooden pulp, and the pulp is actually very essential for skin care. So if you have to If you have to care for your skin, you basically rub this on your skin to protect you from the harsh weather. And if you had skin rashes and something that was a child that was very, very prone to skin rashes, you also use the same ointment to care for their skins. So the Namibian people use that same ointment to cure the fabric and change its color. So it was basically natural way of dyeing the color uh, to change and transform this fabric into something that they liked. Because it was also very flimsy and very light, they would beat the bottom of their skirts or their aprons to weight it down close to the body. Because if you walked, it would just fly all over. So this I thought would be interesting as to see. So when work and mission was introduced to the Namibian people, they basically also came up with a look. So most of the school-going children were asked to sew specific dresses. These two dresses shows that this was the dress that was introduced by the Finnish missionaries because they found them already wearing cloth and apron in a way, which was still traditional style. They didn't like that. They still wanted them to wear kind of Eurocentric style dresses. So these are some of the dresses that were introduced in the schools. So all school going children had to kind of wear this style, and it has kind of become a Namibian aesthetics as well. So for the Herero people, they were the first people were in a connection with missionaries and colonial settlers. And they were not so keen about Christianity, religion, but they just wanted to work and they wanted to actually learn how to make dresses. Some of the missionaries were also not very, very ruthless in trying to convert the Herero people because they thought if they can get them to sew the dress and change how they dress, it's still some kind of influence and also dominance. So, and you can see they had to shave off their hair and then they had to start wearing scarves. The early scarves that they actually adopted were very simple, just tied around the back, around the head. And then some of them were wearing the kapikis. I don't know what's the English. So some of them were wearing that, but through time, the Herero, Damara, and Nama, they stuck more to the scarf. So then the religion became very, very popular because as they lived around the mission, there was nothing else to do but to do what the missionaries do. So church going became quite one of the social gatherings, things around Herero men and women. And you can see all church going Herero men and women were asked to dress in a very Eurocentric way. So it's a suit and it's the dresses, and the women would always cover their head because obviously the traditional headdress is removed. So with time, the making and the remaking of the headscarves started changing. At the beginning, they had to cover their head because obviously they wanted to show that they're women, they're not men, and they didn't want to walk around with nothing on their head. And you can see in the what's the date there? 1953. The shades of the scarf started changing. So the remaking of the scarf actually trying to indicate something very, very powerful here. I would say it's a start of um, value, not value, but symbolism of resistance. So even though we take on the scarf, we have to find our own way of how to dress this scarf. So here are two women. You could see the headdress are changing. The one on the left is more of a Herero woman, and you could see the shape was starting to take the horn kind of protruding far from the head. And on the left, you can see this probably a Damara or a Nama woman. It's very hard to see exactly the change the difference between the two. But even up to now, there's different debates about why did this headdress start looking different. I think Herero women didn't want to look like Nama or the Damara. So they decided to do this different. I mean, as humans, we always want to look unique. We don't want to be associated with the rest of the group. And clothing is one of the things that we use to look different. So then the trade clothes became even more popular. So through the first trade cloth that was traded by Portuguese traders were more striped trade cloth, which is on the far left. And those were popular among Awambo people and Kavango people. And even though there were so many different versions of it, there were a few that were particular. So among the royals, they mostly were the blue and the white. There must be something about the blue. And if I look into the history, I know even among the Ghanaian communities, Asante kings are also known to wear a particular kente cloth that is of blue and white. So there must be a relation between having something that is growing between blue and white. Because when you look at that fabric, it kind of dance around your eyes. So I think when you wear it, it's kind of mesmerizing. And therefore, that particular striped cloth was only worn by the Andonga kings and royals. And then you've got the floral, soft pastel florals that was traded through by the Nama people. And they became very, very particular with the soft pastels. And only after 2019, I think that's when it started changing drastically. And now you see them wearing any other colors, florals, but very bright. So they're no longer so particular with the soft palettes, but they're also very, very bright. I once asked one of the Nama designers, why do you think the color is changing so drastically? He said, no, maybe it's the restitution, because the Nama also have a part of that conversation and they're upfront. So maybe it's an unconscious decision to be bright and loud. And then among the Nama people, not Nama people, but Botswana people, they also were particular with the shweshwe that you can see there. And the Herero also were particular with the shweshwe. But the shweshwe that the Hereros like was more the browns and the reds. The blue was more common with the Tswana people. So among Hereros, they used to call the shweshwe Oshindoishi, maybe because the German missionaries gave them the first cloth and it just became that name. But nowadays they just call it shweshwe or trinkets. And we have manufacturers from South Africa actually producing this particular cloth just for Namibia. Namibia doesn't have any textile manufacturers, so we import everything from South Africa. There's another long history of Dagama manufacturers specifically producing this cloth for Namibian market. So over the time, I saw there was this transition of patchwork becoming printed kind of aesthetics. So in the trade cloth that the Chinese are manufacturing now, you find that they've actually kind of developed this cloth that is patch kind of a design, but it's not real handmade patchwork, but it's a printed version of patchwork. And I feel there's also cross-pollination between the Nama people and the Damara people. They were very fond of the patchwork, but now the Awambo people, which is the bottom line on the leather that you see, which has also been now being produced into a patchwork design. So now you find Chinese manufacturers bringing in all these bright colors and also already patched kind of a printed textile. A lot of seamstresses, they actually are happy with this kind of new version of textiles because they feel like it's much more efficient for them to make these traditional dresses. They don't have to sit and patch up the fabric, but they can just go and find a printed version of patchwork to make the dresses. And also another thing is for Wambo people, they used to dye these fabrics before they attend a ceremony or a gathering. So now the Chinese are bringing in already dyed, kind of a pink, already manufactured in pink, which is the color for Wambo people, and they feel like they don't have to spend time re-dyeing their fabrics and re-dyeing their clothes for a ceremony, that they can just go to a store and find an already dyed or a pink cloth. And as they embrace efficiency, some of the cultural values are also tying with that. So what you see Namibian people, how you see Namibian people dress nowadays, this is a picture of Bahimba people, one of the most unwavering group, I would say. they've stuck to their traditional style, even though it's transitioning and you can see the changes. They're also using textiles. They don't only use leather, but they're still very particular how they wear the textile. They still wear it in the same style as they would wear the traditional dress. So for the men nowadays, they'll even buy a scarf that they'll tie on the backside. And the women, they would always use the leather apron for the back, but the front would become a textile. But they're also very particular about the blue color. I don't know. I've tried to ask, what does it mean? Why not red? Why not white? But there must be some meaning. But I'm also an outsider, so some of this information they will not just share with you because you're an outsider. But I know among Obahimba people, they've got very, very strong beliefs in peers and how people relate socially. So certain peers are only allowed to wear certain color. So this blue must be for a certain peer group, and the younger ones, they wear something much different, and usually the younger ones, they don't wear any color. The belt that I'm wearing today is actually from the adolescent group. Okay, I'm changing and trying to be fashionable, but I don't think they or either people will find that very funny, because in other words, I'm wearing something that is of an adolescent group and I'm not a child. So the Nama people, they still very, very vibrant. The colors have become much brighter, but we also see a lot of versions that are made from printed patchwork kind of a textile. So, but their traditional headdress has also become very, very prominent with colors, but there's also some social status attached to it. So certain women, if you are married, you must tie it in a certain way. If you are a young girl, you must tie it in a certain way. And there's also only specific fabrics are allowed to be used for a scarf. So for the Damara people, they also wear this kind of a dress. So when you gather at some social gatherings, even funerals, you'll find a lot of women wearing such a dress. But you see that the scarf has actually become a form of political standing. So if you are maybe of a close relation to somebody who passed on, for instance, you will print a photo of the deceased on your scarf. But not everyone is going to wear that scarf. So that scarf with a printed photo of somebody who's deceased is only particular to the key core family. The Herero women, I think this is the most iconic. You probably know quite a lot about this. I don't need to say anything. Quite self-explanatory. The Awamba people, Kabango people. So I think there's a lot of artists now in Namibia and fashion designers now in Namibia trying to create fashion with meaning, but also making a statement around whatever is happening. So next, Cynthia Shimming was involved in the repatriation story. This is one of a fashion installation in Berlin. This one is Tuli Mekonjo, also an artist from Namibia. She's a visual artist, but her work is also around working with archives, trying to find her ancestry in the archives. And with that, she usually does a performance piece that goes with the artwork that she creates. So this is Sarah Umlaole, her story that she found in a Finnish missionary school where they taught young kids about Sarah, who's a black Sarah. She became Christian, she was baptized, and shortly after that she died. And this story says when she died, she went to heaven and became white. So there's also a lot of disturbing things that you find in the archive. So she created this story next, where she actually wore as a Wambo woman. And then through the performance, she took off that garment, which is actually the dress that you see in the exhibition that opened last night. I made a replica of that. And then underneath, she was dressed in the traditional clothing. So a lot of artists and a lot of fashion designers, they're collaborating to kind of create fashion with the meaning. Thank you.